Is it still a museum without a very expensive building? Is it still a museum without big powers support? Is it still a museum if there is no gift shop or no cafe or no merchandise? My artistic practice usually includes cinema or performance works, and all of them were not invited. The idea was to confronting the institutions in a very playful and ironical level in order to ask the question who's got the legitimacy to choose which kind of art is offered to the public, but also how. For this room here, this black room, it's one of those typical Hong Kong rooftop houses that were built for lack of space without permission. So I simply painted it black in order to, create a theater feeling, a cinema feeling. When I first moved to Hong Kong in 2013, I found that the city was in lack of independent theaters. It seemed that the cinema distribution was controlled by a few very large companies, but there were not so many alternative voices. Especially in Sham Shui Po, where I was living, there hasn't been a theater for a few decades. It's important to have alternative voices that can show cinema outside of the commercial sphere. In this cinema, usually we play films that are so-called art house films, as well as cult films from the past. It's definitely a selection that is kind of far from what we see in regular commercial theaters. I can say I really respect M+. From the name, M+, I like the fact that they are a museum plus so many things. And I think my practice goes in the exact opposite direction. So maybe you could imagine my practice as M-. The effort in creating this Thai Lane museum, this lane, was precisely in the direction of reclaiming space where space is too expensive. So I have found this lane which was completely overseen. Nobody was taking care of this lane. As so many back lanes in Hong Kong, it was dirty, there's a lot of trash, people use it for dumping things, there's a lot of mice, etc., a lot of leaking water. And slowly over time I have done a lot of performances here. I have kind of improved a bit the lane itself. And also I have invited so many times local people to visit our exhibitions in the lane. The direction and the effort is that of creating space where it doesn't exist. So imagining a museum in a place that could be a museum. It's still a public lane, but if you believe that this is a museum, then it becomes a museum, just like M+ or Tycoon. But if we believe it to be something else, it can totally be something else. Of course, in this way, I have played with believing. Thai Lane, Thai, this word in English, means yours. So I hope when people read it, they can feel that this is their museum. It's reclaimed for everyone to use. People came up with ideas and we just made it possible. So if you go to Google Map and you type Thai Lane, Google Map will show you an art museum with reviews, with photos, with past events. And all of this looks real. And when people come, I hope they will question this very blurry dichotomy between what is real and what is non-real. So it's a museum that is hidden, at the same time is open air, is real, at the same time is fake. And so it's playing on these boundaries. I have seen so many people walking around the lane with a kind of surprise or a kind of non-believing look on their face because they think they're being mocked. Of course, there is a very strong play in putting a museum in this place, because when you are looking at art and some mouse, some rat is just passing next to you, of course you feel something is wrong, something is strange. They do not understand whether or not this is serious. And I think it's an interesting question in their head because it doesn't apply just for this. It can apply to every artwork. When I go to a regular museum and I found funny, or I don't find motivated, or it doesn't touch me, maybe I will also think, what, is this really art? And so in that moment, for me, that's not a valid museum. That's not a valid museum proposition. Or when I go to a museum and I find a crowd of people that use the museum as an Instagram photo platform, and that's it, they don't look at anything, they just to make photos for their Instagram, I might think, okay, it's a museum that is being used for a different purpose. So in that instance, is that still a museum? And all these questions I hope are addressed in our Lane Museum performance. I tried to look at what can be interpreted differently and what is proposed by a museum that can be used to understand the relation between the museum and the society.